All right. Sasha, good to see you.
Hey, Jerry, how are ya?
Good. It's Monday, March 31st. And so while people are coming in from the waiting room, I'll thank our sponsor. Many of our episodes of the past few months have been sponsored by Silk Title Company. So I do some work with Silk, and they were generous to sponsor us here. So if you're looking for a tech-enabled partner, especially in data delivery and title delivery, reach out to me, reach out to Silk. Want to thank them for the sponsors. Hopefully, we're providing enough entertainment and breaking news and insights that you'll want to sponsor too. So don't hesitate to reach out to Sasha or reach out to me if you'd like to be on the show or sponsor the show. And today I thought we would do something kind of cool. Every so often we don't have a guest, and we like to do a topic or a series of topics where we get to share our insights. One of the reasons we wanted to work together on this show is to learn from each other and share our insights. And so I just felt like today would be a good day to do that. My agenda for today was going to be largely around home buying and first-time home buyers, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I felt like maybe off the cuff, we could just talk for a second about Rocket Mortgage. I obviously spent 5.5 years there. I did some startup and M&A work while I was there in various ways. And so, just like everybody else this morning at 7:45 a.m., we all heard that Rocket bought Mr. Cooper. And I just thought maybe, even though today's going to be mostly around purchase, mostly around first-time home buyers, it might be worth at least mentioning breaking news in that way. I think that I'll just mention real quick, I think that the Redfin acquisition really made a ton of sense. I've always been a fan of that platform. Back when I was at Rocket, we looked at that platform with admiration and possible opportunity. And obviously, it took a few years, came around. But I think it creates a really nice digital funnel and experience at the front end. And then obviously, like anytime you can acquire loans that you can then retain from a refi perspective, that deal kind of pays for itself. Obviously, Mr. Cooper much more expensive than the Redfin deal, but both were all stock deals, so they kept their cash. And now that threat that we had heard about from some LinkedIn commentators, Greg and others, about servicers taking more and more of the refi volume share when rates do drop, I think this is clear evidence of that. So I just thought we would start there, Sasha. Definitely don't feel on the spot. We can move on to first-time homebuyers, but if you had any observations in the last few hours, glad to take them here on Now Next Later.
Yeah, well, I mean, my personal opinion, so take my company out of the mix so I don't cause any problems for us. No, but like my personal opinion is one, I'm not surprised given the administration change that now we're going to start to see more acquisitions. We've seen a lot of kind of, actually, I'm going to bring my company back into it. My chairman mentioned this morning, a lot of, M&A work because of distress in the last few years, but we haven't, I would say, seen as much strategic. And now this is like maybe the precipice of, maybe we see more, maybe we don't. What I find interesting in what you said around servicing is, Rocket's a client for us, and we know this to be true. And I think they published this pretty publicly. They have 83% recapture rate. So
Mhm.
they've done a very good job being able to keep their customers
Mhm.
engaged, so that when it's time for them to refi or buy their next home, they've got them kind of in hand.
Yep.
So I'm not sure that this acquisition changes that for them. It just sets them up to be better suited to manage right across the workflow, to your point, having Redfin on the front end and now this on the other side. But yeah, I'm sure lots of people are sitting around looking at the news going, wow, lot of movement there, lot of money being spent, a lot of strategic investment, and what's next. And I don't think that, they're obviously a force in the industry, but I don't think this makes them an overwhelming force. I think it just continues to strengthen their position and maybe pushes them up the ladder a little bit more, but be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right that the big headline is probably just around the market share of refinance.
Mhm.
And what does it mean for that? How many millions of homes, are on the list and that type of thing. And when I say on the list, like if you have 3 million homes and you bring in 3 million more, that's just that many more refinances that you can either proactively target or, like you said, refine that thing. I still think there is purchase business that is not easily captured for Rocket. I don't think they're top of mind for a lot of purchase. Even I will say and this is a 5-year-old observation, but I remember struggling with trying to get purchase business out of the refi book, meaning if somebody was buying a second home or somebody was moving up or downsizing, it was even hard 5 years ago to get them to think of Rocket Mortgage for that transaction. It was so ingrained in refi that when I went to buy my second home or I went to downsize, I didn't even really think of Rocket. And so they've
Right.
been addressing that, I know, and this will sort of go. But Marvin in the chat,
I know he's asking the hard question. I have some
what's
thoughts that
next
I
on the
want
shopping list? And RKT didn't clean up its voting shares. Listen, the stock price has always been a bad indicator in this industry. I don't think Wall Street understands mortgage originators, but also there's an and also, which is originators are sales and marketing organizations. So until you start adding component pieces around tech or servicing or other things, the market's always going to view you as a sales and marketing organization. I think also a lot of people probably may not think this matters or may not even realize it, but Rocket only took about 22% of the company public. If Rocket had taken 100% of the company public or 85% of the company public, I think the stock would get treated way differently. It was a portion, to Marvin's point about the shares, that I think Wall Street doesn't love not having control. So it's a depressed stock price always because public shareholders are a minority owner, not a majority owner. And as a result, this is going to be the case. So stock price is a bad indicator for Rocket on success, but they're adding pieces. They're being way more aggressive than they were when I was there. And so really interesting to watch, to your point. So I appreciate you being willing to talk a little breaking news.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I think just as much as they might look at other acquisitions, to Marvin's point, I think they're just also coming out more to partner in the industry than they were before. They used to be, as you know, you worked there, a little bit more closed off, and I'm seeing signs of more coming forward and figuring out how to be um I don't know what the right word is, if it's collaborative or just looking for ways to partner to help with the ecosystem as we drive forward. They have a lot of things that they do that I don't think is right for me to necessarily share, as I would say someone from Rocket, but I do see signs of them leaning in a way that I didn't see, 5, 10 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. I think that's true. So one of the things that I've been commenting on LinkedIn that's related is this idea of the American dream. They came out in the Super Bowl and did an Own the Dream Country Roads ad. They've
Yeah.
added a couple videos or commercials since then about owning the dream. But I just read a report. So for those that watch our show, you should continue to only watch our show, which is where all the innovation happens. But there is a show on Tuesdays called Mortgages with Millennials, also on the Chrisman Commentary Network with Kristen Messerly and Robbie Chrisman. And Kristen issued the Next Gen Homebuyer report, which I dug into. And the reason it overlaps with innovation and now next later is because I think consumer sentiment among first-time homebuyers is critical for MLOs to be operating in. I mean, yeah, you get your leads from a referral source by and large, particularly for distributed retail and branch managers. But the reality is like, if those referral sources aren't seeing the interest, if you're not getting the pre-approvals that you used to get, I think everybody would tell you or tell you would know better on the verification side, Sasha, but like I think what they're saying is, oh no, we still have plenty of pre-approvals. I think that's true because supply is so depressed, but I don't think there's as much guaranteed interest in home ownership year over year. It's going down. The report also said trust is going down. To me, that's a challenge to product strategy. That's a challenge to product managers as much as marketers. And I'm curious your opinion as you see customer sentiment, you see first-time homebuyer sentiment dropping related to home ownership and trust in institutions, trust in mortgage loan officers. I'm curious, what do you think that means to mortgage companies this year, next year, as they think about their strategy?
Yeah, I'd want to see her report so that I understand the full context and perspective. Can you tell me how she defines next gen as far as age is concerned? Let's start there for a minute.
Yeah, so they survey 1,000 people, and they have to conduct that many more surveys to get their 1,000
Sure.
responses.
Sure.
Recent transactions. So you've actually, the way that they reach out is you've been involved in the mortgage process in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z, millennials, and then I don't remember the exact ages,
Okay.
but that sort of typical cutoff that we see, I want to say 82, 83 on the elder millennial side, and then
Okay.
call it about 10 or 12 years. So that
Yeah.
early mid 90s becomes a Gen Z, I believe.
Yeah.
And so the stat was that the trust stat that stuck out in my mind was uh, the lowest trust rating among MLOs was 19.5%. So on like an approval rating scale,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
at 19% approval rating for trust with Gen Z is your kind of
Interesting.
typical loan officer.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, like I said, without digging into it, it's hard to know, specifics, but generalizing it, there are things we know to be true. For one, we know financial literacy is still an area that needs focus. And I know that's something that Kristen's organization and many others are very passionate about.
yep.
I think even though we're not the most financially literate people, regardless of our generation, um, younger generations tend to believe they know it all. And so it's always like a little tongue in cheek on like, I know it all, but yet I'm asking for help
Mhm.
without asking for help. Right. So I think you probably have to package it appropriately, which I'm not sure MLOs are up for the task. But how do you become a trusted advisor with them the way you would in my seat as a vendor with a lender, right? And help you understand that I have your best interest at heart and that I'm really looking at solving a holistic scenario for you, AKA what's the best way to get you into a home. And I think there's a lot that's coming out that hopefully will help with that, right? Number one, if you lean more towards being financial literate and you do want more control of your data, the more consumer permissioned opportunities that we see, the more that trust gets put in their own hands. And now it's like, well, listen, you have some ability to influence and manage this. Things like simulators, right? We came to market with FICO simulator. Other vendors will be able to do the same, not just with FICO, but with others. And so being able to work with, from an MLO perspective, with your consumer and say, hey, before you go through an approval process, let's take a look at, where you probably would land with a pre-approval. And then let's go use a simulator to figure out where's the best bang for your buck to prepare you so that you can get the best loan product, the best interest rate, like the best scenario possible to put you in a home. And so I think it's just continuing to be creative and innovative. And I listen, when the upcycle eventually hits, God knows when that will be, if I'm still be in the industry or not, things will go fast and maybe these things won't be as necessary. But I don't think it's coming soon enough that it's not worth the time to invest in looking at these different tools and resources. And just, I've said this before on other calls, level up your game, right? Because you're going to have to meet your consumers where they're at, and they're all going to require a little bit of a different flavor. But I think from a next gen standpoint, those are the different areas I'd probably lean into.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I would think of it this way too, which is, a lot of people find their real estate agent through a referral, a friend or a family saying, use my person, or here's who I used, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
typically hasn't happened as much with mortgage. But what you're saying is there are tools, there are widgets, there are calculators, there's simulators. If you get further up funnel, I was having a conversation with Dave Savage recently, the mortgage coach. Dave was saying, parents we know help their kids with down payments. That is a pretty common, maybe I think that statistics are somewhere around half of first-time homebuyers right now get some help from friends or family. And you can actually market to your refi clients for their kids. Have their parents refer your tools, refer your simulator to their family, to their kids, because we know that conversation is taking place. Also, the last few years have been really high credit quality. So the likelihood you have parents in your portfolio that have kids looking for a house, probably pretty high odds. Like there's a good correlation there. So I really like getting up funnel by going to unusual places, or maybe the different places than we've had to go before, to
Yeah.
get those tools in people's hands. I would classify that as sort of the now.
Yeah.
And I want to dig into a couple things you said for next and later. But primarily, there are also a bunch of people without parents, without the rich uncle, who can't get that for a down payment. And one of the things that I've been digging into is Other tools. What else do we have? We obviously have state housing programs. We always have. With this Fannie and Freddie, probably elevates the need for state housing programs because that's where a lot of this business may flow if we see a shrinking footprint from the GSEs. And so the two areas I wanted to ask you about, and we'll start with just like initial reactions from a product perspective, and then we'll kind of dig into what it means. One is shared equity to
Mhm.
replace PMI, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the
Mhm.
second one is co-buying, three or four,
Hmm.
you know, non-domestic partners, right? Three or four friends
Yeah.
buying a house together. Let's start with the first one. So the next step, I think, for first-time home buyers is I need an assist. I need a partner to get me access to this market. And for me, PMI represents two things. One, lower down payment, huge advantage. 3% down, 5% down, 10% down. That's very important for this first-time home buyer. But then also, it comes with a slightly higher monthly payment. And so the question for shared equity that I'll toss to you, like, how do you feel about this product would be instead of putting 5% down and paying it, sort of paying the risk in your monthly payment with PMI, I
Mhm.
can actually put 5% down, get 15% from
Mhm.
a shared equity provider. Now I have a 80 LTV loan. Now I have a lower monthly payment, and I have basically 10 years to figure it out. What I mean by figure it out is I've got the lower monthly payment now. I'm in the house. So I'm making equity, I'm making appreciation. And with the lower monthly payment, I'm more liquid. And then I can either love what I'm doing and just end up with an 85% amortization schedule, which is pretty good for a lot of first-time home buyers, and or plan to buy it back over time on my schedule while I'm liquid rather than paying it monthly to the lender's insurance product. What's your feeling on that as a potential product for
Yeah.
what, like I said, next? It's doable right now. It's a non-agency product right now, but really like what's about to happen in the market. So that's the first one.
Okay, loaded question, and I didn't take notes than I normally do. So let's see if I can remember all the thoughts that are flowing through my head. So first and foremost, just like anything else that's new, we don't know until we try. So I definitely think from a pragmatic standpoint, it sounds like good idea. Let's try. The questions I have that are both, supportive and maybe not sure are, you said it's not agency approved yet. Will it be?
Mhm.
Also, we don't know what the agency world is going to look like, right? I think we can
We don't.
all guess that there's a significant push to privatize the GSEs. There's, a likelihood, sadly, that Ginny will have a smaller footprint, which puts a lot of current first-time home buyer products and programs at risk, which makes you go, well, we're going to have to come up with probably some other options.
Mhm.
And then, you think about increase in other costs, insurance, otherwise, and how that increases your LTV, and then that creates problems in and of itself. So if this can help kind of in different ways address all those issues I just mentioned, and it's something where let's get it out there, let's test the market, let's see if it works, it might be the innovative thing that changes or pivots us on a different path for how we think about supporting first-time home buyers, given that the climate is just going to become tighter and harder based on where I sit right now.
Yeah, right on. I mean, when I thought about, I had worked on some research in this area as well, and I always take in Kristen's research as we mentioned, but like one of the things I found was the biggest response from what I would call the industry or conventional wisdom when you talk about this area is, and I'm boiling it down and making it provocative to make the point, but it's basically work harder, wait longer. That's the message we send. When you can't afford a down payment, when you can't afford a house, it is you should work harder, you should wait longer. And I just don't think that resonates with consumers. And I don't think any of the products that we're building from a technology perspective, a consumer perspective, are built that way in any other industry. Most other industries are like, actually, how do we create products that are on-ramps, bite-sized pieces, smaller things? Like I always come back to Schwab. I mean, I know Mike put in the chat about Merrill Lynch has a parent power
Mhm.
mortgage. I always think of Schwab. What did Schwab do? It took something that was behind the curtain and complex and made it readily accessible to the consumer retail user. Ever since then, we've seen that in a variety of different ways. And so this is that in my mind, is just creating something that's hard to, take down in its full capacity and bringing it down to like, what's a piece we can get a consumer into the game? Similar to compound interest. The earlier you start, the better you are. We got to get people in the game. And so I
Bob
hope,
asked two good questions. I'm going to break them into two. So the first one is, I have not done this, so I don't know, Jared, if you have looked at comparing pricing. He initially called it shared equity, shared appreciation, but basically compare this equity model that you're referring to mortgage insurance, lender paid insurance, et cetera.
yeah, there's two pieces to this. One is these aren't technically lenders in my view because they are co-owners of a part of the equity structure and the capital structure for the house. However, to Bob's point, states have been really confused by this because a
Right.
lot of people will assign like a $0 lien or a no money lien to maintain their place in the record that they are part of the ownership structure. And that throws off state regulators big time because they see a lien, even if it's a $0 lien, and they go, I want to regulate you like a lender. I only understand debt. I will only regulate as debt. The other thing that's super complicating is a lot of the shared equity programs that buy equity from homeowners do it as a second lien, a true lender second lien with licensing and securitization. Well, that's really confused the down payment version because they're not the same companies, but certainly they look alike. And so regulators have been really confused. Ultimately, really, they're a co-owner. They are technically a co-buyer. But whether you see them that way, we know regulation is always kind of mixed on that. And then pricing. I would say this, pricing is compressing. For sure, you can't beat conventional pricing, even with PMI, usually, just because of all the benefits and the efficiencies we've gained over years and years and years of doing this. But what we're finding, and this is actually a perfect segue to what I want to talk to you about, because you mentioned Zactus, and this is right in your wheelhouse
Mhm.
for a company, is the thing that's boggling my mind is that these non-agency deals that are priced a little bit higher are less risky than a conventional loan. And here's
Mm.
why. The 5% down PMI buyer who used every last penny to get in that house is a
Mhm.
way higher risk than
Well,
someone who maintained liquidity and has a corporation behind them, a trust fund behind them, also invested in the home. So it's on paper a non-agency product and it gets pricing based on liquidity risk, not on credit risk. The credit risk of these households is way safer than that conventional buyer who was told to liquidate everything just to get in the house and doesn't have any money left for the hot water heater or the roof or whatever. Um, and so this was going to be my question to you because this also relates to the co-buyer. So I don't want to lose sight. This actually relates to both. Could we see tools and could we see models where we're actually doing group risk, household verifications, because we're so focused on one buyer, one house, one appraisal, one title company, one everything. That's how we've structured the whole thing. Even when we have married couples, it's like, well, we'll look at you both separately because we're only used to doing one at a time. So even though you're together in the house, we'll still do one at a time. We'll just do it twice. And what
yeah.
I'm saying is there an opportunity for innovation for vendors, technology companies, as well as lenders around this kind of like household risk model where it's like, well, what capital is at play here? What credit risk is at play here? Because I think we could show that a lot of these houses, you got three, four incomes in a house, you got three, four millennials buying a house together. I would think the DTI should be incredibly low if you put it all together because now you have four incomes in the house. If you have four people buying a house together, if you're doing shared equity, now you could actually show if we ever figure out how to do residual assets and cash flow, you could show this person's depth of liquidity. We just can't show it. And nobody seems to care about it because it hasn't made it to the securitization spreadsheet
Yeah.
in any every way. Do you think there's a future there, or am I totally delusional?
I don't think you're totally delusional. Keyword in the sentence, totally.
Yep.
No, I honestly, it's so hard. And I think I like our balance because you are like pushing the edge of where we should at least explore. whether it works or not, whether it's sustainable and scalable or not, don't know until we try. To Bob's point, like he didn't say this directly, but like you're gonna have to find some, friendly states that have been known for testing out right new products, new programs to try and get the regulatory bodies to be on board. We have an unknown regulatory environment that may throw some of this out the window for all we know. But I do think in general, here's where my pragmatism and maybe negative Nancy is going to come in is I don't know if lenders are ready for this. Like there's so many other advancements that it's like you're talking about going from crawling to running and just
Mhm.
forget walking, right? Like there's some advancements that I feel we needed to make in the walk stage that we just can't seem to get to for, because in a down market, we're all trying to survive. And in an up market, we're just flying away selling loans. And so we never really like lean into it at the level that I think we need to. How do we make the right steps and advancements so that we can try certain things like this on for size in a way that says, hey, maybe this is the next evolution and way that we're going to have to go to get creative, to get people into homes, given the fact that we know pricing is going to continue to be an issue across the board. And thus far, based on the numbers I see, people aren't making more money to complement managing the price hikes across the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, which is the best way to lower prices is increase supply. Like we know that's true. So these are all like in the face of limited supply, I would say,
Right.
right? Like if we were
Yeah.
making enough houses and there were enough housing units to meet, that's how you get affordable attainable housing is you just create more units. In the fact that we can't means, okay, now you're stuck with what we got. So in order to get what we got, how do you get into it easier? How do you get into it faster, better, stronger
Yeah.
without creating systemic risk? And I think more income by adding people or offsetting liquidity risk or these other risks with a corporate partner. I'm saying corporate, but it's like an investor. It's a
Sure.
it's a fund that invests alongside of you. Were two ways that I've landed on that can fit the current system. And when I say can fit, just for the audience, like with co-buying, it's already approved by Fannie and Freddie. So 3 or 4 co-borrowers, we
Sure.
know how to do it. It's slow, like I said, because we're still doing everybody one at a time. But the idea is you can do that. So that's probably your best walk version, if I would say, is like partner with a company that
That's fair.
generates leads for millennials buying a house together. Like the company I work with a lot is called Nestment, but there's a bunch that do this. And so like that would be a great example. You could walk by just doing something you can already do. You can already deliver that loan to Fannie and Freddie. And then two, we know down payment grants work. We can do those. We know how to do those. We do down payment in seconds to get people a first-time homebuyer loan through state programs, through nonprofits, through employers. So this would be just substituting an investor partner for an employer grant or for a state grant. Your system can already do it, but admittedly, until we have conventional approval, you're selling that to Veris or you're selling that to New Res or wherever. And so that is a limitation somewhat for some lenders. But if we're
Well, and
talking about walking, I do think these aren't like major changes to your system as we then work to develop a more holistic data visualization and a holistic verification visualization that I threw
yeah.
out. How does that sit with you? Just in terms of like if you were.
It does. I think the biggest battle cry I would have for lenders to vendors is do a better job of making it easier for them to consume internally. And I know that that's a huge ask and maybe an unfair ask because lenders, you own your own ops shops, but I get consuming change is hard. So as an ecosystem, different vendors with LOS and POS and servicing system providers need to come together and figure out how do we make these workflows easier to begin with so that when you want to ingest a change like this, it doesn't take 2 years and too many resources that you don't have so that you can try it on for size, right? Because I think that onboarding, the vendor management, the change management process is that adoption hurdle that causes most lenders to say, I got to pick and choose my battles. And right now, I'm just trying to keep my doors open or I can try one new thing but I'm not going to be able to try 10. And so I think we have to do better at setting a foundation that helps them um, manage that change, consume that change easier, and then lenders have to be willing to find the right partners and trust us to help you do that. Until we do that, I think a lot of these ideas are great. I just don't know we'll see as much movement as we'd like.
Yeah, I think uh the usual path of change tends to be that we will wait until absolutely required by
Yeah.
competition or by a new product,
Mhm.
meaning a new product offering. But I think increasingly we're seeing both speed and demand kind of help along, I think, people's willingness to think more about it. And so I know I'll have to talk about it 5 to 10 to 17 more times
Yeah,
before,
hammer it in.
before we get there. But I think this opportunity, I want to take the opportunity today because I do think we're entering an uncertain economic environment, which could open up supply in a variety of ways. I mean, to your point about the GSEs, like I think the footprint's going to get smaller, but I do think everyone wants to do something around supply, whether
Yeah.
it's construction, whether it's condos, whether it's we're seeing more and more kind of like second or mezzanine financing options out there for state housing agencies or developers. And so I think that's one area that if I'm a lender, it's going to be really hard to stand up a builder division in a year, but it's not that hard to stand up some of these other products that you already are good at. It's just finding the system and finding the enthusiasm.
Yeah. I have one more thought, but it's not a happy one, so we'll leave it for next time.
Let me know when you want to work on that household verification project. I'm here for
Let's
it.
do it. I mean, we should get ahead of, I guess what I was going to say is, look, there's a lot of people that have not been paying their mortgage because they've had programs to help support them through COVID that push is going to come to shove, and then we will have more inventory whether we like it or not. And so, there's opportunities, both good, bad, but there's always an opportunity if you look for it. So I think we've got to start testing it. I hear you.
Yeah. This is all related. I do like how it is all interrelated because there are people sitting on equity in their homes, whether or not they can continue to make their mortgage payment, to your point, their home probably appreciated in 98% of the markets in this country in the meantime. So there is a lot that is going to happen in that equity market this year, whether it's out of necessity or out of demand. So
Better happen fast before prices go down.
no kidding. Well, thank you, Sasha. Really appreciate the opportunity to jump on and have our own show. And
Yep.
we'll be back next week, almost certainly with a guest. But until then, thank you for joining us on Now Next Later. Please share and comment on this episode, and we'll be back to talk to you all soon. Thank you so much.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.